This guy walks in an orange jumpsuit into my sales office, dirt under his nails, just looked like he was a mechanic. Comes in asking about this condo, very unassuming, never expected anything from this guy. Turns out this man apparently owned a like one of the largest textile firms in the Midwest. Well, he ended up purchasing one of our most expensive penthouses in the whole community. And so it was a real lesson for me to take everyone at face value and, allow them to show you who they are and how they want to reveal themselves.
Today's guest is Bree Long, and this conversation is a masterclass in leading with emotional intelligence when the pressure is high. I asked Bree to join me because she brings a deeply human approach to leadership, balancing candor and compassion and clarity in a way that draws people in. In this episode, we talk about what it means to be the emotional thermostat for your team, how to keep people motivated through uncertainty, and the unspoken power of listening well. In today's episode, it comes down to this. When people feel seen, they show up. And that's how momentum is built.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of The Marketer. I'm really excited to have you join us today. And I'm really excited about my guest. I have Bree Long, who is a powerhouse in real estate development and investments. She's going to just deliver some excellent information for you today. The show that we have is really dealing with how you go from a nationwide shutdown that we were all a part of, that we all hated, and how you come out of that. With Bree being in real estate, she's so heavily dependent on that face-to-face meeting and walking people through things and so on and so forth. You can imagine, super huge challenge. But then, as things started to progress back to face-to-face meetings, how did that come about and what did it look like? Today, we're going to talk about that. So welcome, Bree. Awesome to have you on the show.
Well, thank you so much, Monty. I'm so happy to be here. Really excited to speak with you today. It's funny thinking about back on the pandemic that's behind us now. It feels like it went on for 5 years, and it feels like it was just yesterday, and it also feels like it was a decade ago. So I have many mixed emotions about what we're going to talk about today related to sales and marketing, but I'm excited to join you. So thank you for having me.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. And you're totally right. It does feel like it's just been 5 years ongoing, and especially in my case, because my wife just came down with COVID again, just about a week ago.
Well, she's not alone. I keep hearing that. It seems like we're having the summer COVID, hit everyone. So she's not alone. I hope she recovers quickly.
Yeah, thank you. She's thankfully, what we found with this is kind of each time you get it, it's less and less and less, but it's still a nuisance, isn't it?
Indeed. It's a big super flu that we all ran from for 3 years.
Yeah. But we're through it.
We made it.
Let's take a step back, though. And I want to ask you, when the world shut down, what was your biggest challenge in maintaining those sales and client relationships? Because your standard practice, like many of us, now gone. What'd you do?
Completely. Well, I should preface this by saying, yes, I do work in the world of real estate and development. And that's a nuance because it's, we're talking about a high ticket sale. This is the biggest purchasing decision that most people will make in their life. So I will tell you, the biggest challenge coming from that vantage point is that, just trying to facilitate a high touch sales process. And if you recall, during the initial days of the shutdown, real estate was a sector that was completely shut down. So we had no ability to show property. When we did eventually get to show property, we had to have these disclosures signed by every buyer before they even walked on your site. Obviously, it was a time of real deep fear for a lot of people, and just trying to engage with people was difficult, let alone getting them there in person. So the biggest challenge was obviously you can't show them the home and tour them through all of the visceral experience of being in the space that they might envision themselves purchasing and living happily ever after in. So with all that said, we leaned and relied heavily on any method and modality that would allow us to reach people virtually. So obviously video became a huge component of our marketing efforts. Certainly wasn't technology that was new to us. We've been working with virtual film and fly-through videos for at least, the past decade or so, and things had come a long way in terms of just technical abilities. But because we had the advantage of in-person selling, as an industry, I don't think most marketers or sales leaders had relied heavily on video. Well, now we had to fully rely on video, and that's what we did. We took the entire sales process into a virtual environment and became production experts, and that's what we did. So it was exciting, but it was definitely challenging and, effective on many levels. And yet it showed itself to be insufficient in that there's nothing that replaces the face-to-face connection and visceral experience of another person in front of you, leading you through the discovery of ultimately a product that they're going to purchase that's going to change their life.
Yeah, without question. And, one of the reasons why I was excited about bringing you on the show and our conversation prior to the show was that you are in such a very face-to-face, heavily relationship-oriented industry. When you're having just exactly like what you said, I mean, these are huge decisions that people make. That means you're dealing with a lot of heavy relationships that you're having to form. And while the tools were available, I imagine that was a pretty huge transition for people. I know that when we were buying our house, we always, we started, and we didn't do it during COVID, by the way, but, you always want to see those virtual walkthroughs and stuff like that. But there was never a time that you were not wanting to go out and just walk through it and hear from, your agent really all about that property and what there is to it. So what were the different tools and stuff that you began implementing, and were they established more or less during COVID, or were they there and were they already really good, if you would, that allowed you to do that? Or was it a process in building those up?
That's a great question. And you mentioned something that I think is worth noting that, videos, especially in new home sales, they're great tools, but they're lead magnets.
Yeah,
They're not the conversion. They're not what ultimately closes the sale. And I found that to be true for us in our efforts to market virtually. Yes, people wanted to watch our videos. We oftentimes would guide people through a hosted virtual tour and talk to them on Zoom as we were guiding the video tour. And it was a nice appetizer, quite frankly. And we did a lot of
yeah,
sales flirting, a lot of sales flirting. But what we found
definitely.
during that process is that, despite the fact that the market was fairly well paralyzed in general, people just weren't transacting during at least that 1 or 2 month period where we were in heavy lockdown. We just weren't transacting. But what we found is we went back to, the guiding principles of good sales tactics, which is follow up, building relationships, picking up the phone and calling the person week by week just to touch base, not to try to, get them to come down and purchase and sign on the dotted line that day, but to build
Yeah,
relationship, knowing that, timing is everything in sales. I think great salespeople oftentimes, can build urgency to get the close earlier than perhaps another salesperson would. But ultimately, what you're trying to do is establish that right timing for the buyer. And sometimes there's only so much you can do to influence that. There's other factors in the
right.
person's life that are ultimately going to dictate when they're ready to make that purchasing decision. So your job is to be the person that's top of mind when they're actually ready to pull the trigger. And so that's what we found. I trained our salespeople to be diligent and relentless in follow-up, which is, again, something we should be doing in the sales process, regardless of whether there's a global pandemic or not.
Yeah, the stats on sales follow-up with most salespeople are really kind of interesting or shocking, whichever you way look at it. But
Well,
most people will only follow up maybe once, and that's it.
so I
When,
just read a statistic, Monty. The statistic is that 80% of sales, and we're not even talking high ticket sales like a real estate purchase, just
yeah,
80% of the standard sale requires 5 touches or follow ups. Most salespeople, 40% of salespeople make that many follow ups. Well, what about the other 60%? They don't even get to the number that might give them a chance of converting to sale.
right.
So
It's the
I
difference
see it
between
as
success or failure. But
totally. And it's the
yeah,
biggest challenge, I think, for most salespeople is getting in the rhythm of taking action on a daily basis that's probably monotonous and mundane and doesn't feel like it's producing results in that moment. And that can be frustrating to continue to put energy into something that isn't bearing fruit. But over time, those small incremental daily actions really start to accretively build. And you'd be surprised the difference between a salesperson who is religious about their follow-up and their performance versus someone else who may be very charismatic and naturally outgoing and has the salesperson personality, but just can't be bothered to really give the effort and focus to the follow-up.
This kind of veers off a little bit, but I would love to pick your brain on it. In this sales process, right? You've got a high ticket item, and that always is an elongated sales process because, people are, there's an education process. They've got to evaluate, what's the benefits to this? So much more than just, your average, small ticket sale, if you would. And it's a life-changing sale, right? So when we talk about, when you're directing your team, you've got to have no less than 5 touches. Can you walk through what is the timing of that? Like, do you have a specific amount of time that they have to put between the touches so they don't come across as pushy? Or is it really, we got to strike while the iron's hot here? You've got somebody that's interested in this market. We need to get going. You have any thoughts there?
Oh, it's such a loaded question, Monty. I have a couple. I have
Just
a
throwing
lot
it
of
on you, so.
I have a lot of thoughts about it, and I think there is, I think, real virtue in allowing a sales agent to have some autonomy in figuring out what the rhythm and cadence should be with follow-up and communication with the client. And ideally, if you hire well, you hire good salespeople that can respectfully earn that autonomy to lead the sales process in a way that works for them, knowing that they're going to get it done and they're going to give, the proper amount of follow-up to give a chance of a sale occurring. But when you're managing larger sales teams, you have to give them system and policy. And so, what is the cadence of follow-up? I feel as a general rule that, that person, whoever you touch, should get an immediate follow-up. And it should be an email or a phone call to say, thank you for visiting, thank you for coming in. And then I always tell my salespeople, on videos and phone calls especially, to, tell their prospects exactly what my speech teacher in college told me. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. And so I think that's a good format for follow-up is, hey, it was great to meet with you. Thank you so much. I enjoyed showing you X, Y, and Z. You really responded well to Y. Here are all the things you liked about Y. Here's the next step in our process. I'm going to follow up with you by X date. Now the buyer has an understanding of what you are proposing as a follow-up protocol, and your job is to earn trust by making sure you follow up as you've promised. And that's really all it is. It's that simple. And so, as much as I'd like to say there's a standard formula for follow-up, I think good salespeople have the emotional intelligence to know that that it may differ from prospect to prospect. We also found one of the lessons, as an aside, out of the pandemic was modality of communication. We were forced to communicate by Zoom and phone call, text.
Right.
But what I found is, some buyers only want to communicate by text. Some absolutely want to speak with someone. They want to hear a voice. They want to know that there's a pulse on the other side of the phone. And so I've tried to give my salespeople a little more liberty in figuring that out for themselves, what works best for each client, and then stick to that. So adapt your communication strategy based on what works for your client and where they want to be met. So those are all important nuances. And I'd love to say there's one tried and true formula, but I'd like to also think that good salespeople, as long as they're following up consistently and following through on what they've promised, they're going to get a good result. In terms of conversion to sales, and the ratios are going to be pretty high.
I think 2 things that you said in there were just spot on. And I love that you have your team put a time on when they're going to follow up. Setting those expectations for people, that also for the potential customer or for the customer is saying, okay, I need to be prepared by this amount of time. So it kind of triggers, I think in their mind, okay, I need to start thinking towards this, right? And the second thing that I really appreciate in there is what you're talking about is in terms of the modality of conversations. It's who people like to communicate differently. We're not all, cookie cutter people, and you are in a relationship industry, right? And so if you're really talking to people and it's going to take a high degree of relationship to close a deal, you really better understand who you're dealing with and what they are interested in. How do you get to that point? Is it just a matter of asking or kind of figuring out what they like?
I think that's also a great question, and it's one that I always try to lead sales teams to be servant based in their efforts, and I think people lose commission breath if if they're focused on service, right? That neediness, that desperation that a lot of salespeople get, that falls by the wayside if truly your intent as a salesperson is to solve someone's problem. If you are truly in service of solving this person's problem through the product you're offering, then you're winning as a salesperson. But you have to authentically be driven to solve that problem for the buyer. And if you truly have that intent, the questions come naturally. The questions just fall
Yeah.
out of you because you have a natural curiosity about the person in front of you. You really have their interest in mind, and you're curious about them as people. What's going to make them happy to live here? What's top of mind for them? Is it their pets, their kids? Is it their commute to work? Is it the patio with all the lush greenery around? What makes them tick? What makes their
Yeah.
heart sing? What are they afraid of? How is this product going to solve their problems? How's it going to make their life better? How can you paint that picture for them by asking good questions? And I'm no I'm no exception. Salespeople are talkative. We're chatty, and we can talk forever. And you have to remember as a salesperson to shut the F up sometimes. Ask a good question, and then let someone give you the answer, because if you shut up, they'll tell you far more than you asked for oftentimes, and they'll just keep going on with free form of thought, and you get so many rich little nuggets that ultimately serve your efforts as a salesperson to close this individual on this home. So I think that's super important, is to and that comes with time. I think also young salespeople are very eager and they want to sell,
Yeah.
and they want to demonstrate the product. And it's less about the demonstration of the product. It's more about the discovery of the person in front of you. So that's, to me,
That's
paramount. As long as you have authentic interest, you're going to be a great salesperson.
that's so good. Servant selling and commission breath are two of my favorite terms. I just That's so good. So can you share with me, you made it through that time, and I'd love to hear any stories that you'd have that of something that was very successful, or maybe something that was a total flop during that time, but then transition it back into now things started opening up. You weren't so closed. What'd you hold on to? What'd you get rid of? And kind of how did it come back together once you were able to get back together?
I have a great example that I think is absolutely relevant to that point in time that you're talking about, when we were just starting to peek our heads out, but we were all still nervous and we didn't know what it meant and how we
Yeah.
were going to go on in the world. And that was a very vulnerable time, I think, just culturally for all of us. Um, I had a project in Pacific Palisades in Los Angeles, overlooking the Pacific Ocean. And as I mentioned, when the pandemic started, we were right in the beginning of our sales process, and we were doing a lot of sales flirting with our lead follow-up and our Zoom presentations and our videos, et cetera. And just about the time that the world opened up, Los Angeles allowed us to go back to restaurants, the stores opened, and then about, I would say, half of the population seemed to be very trepidatious about that. They still wanted to wear their masks. They didn't want any interaction with other people. And then the other half of people were like, let me out of the house. I need to go to some event. I need to see another person.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was really interesting. We had these, two bifurcated sides of the whole community, where some were like, no, I'm staying in my house forever. And the others were dying to get out.
Yeah.
I had a hunch and a sense that people were absolutely dying for just interaction with one another. And I also knew that the lifeblood of our business is the broker community. So, and those folks are very chatty and very extroverted because they're salespeople. So they
Yeah.
definitely wanted to get out and socialize. So we were right at the time where, we were looking for, well, what's the hook? What's the hook to hold an event? We had these open air rooftop penthouse decks that were perfect for, an event overlooking the Pacific Ocean, but we needed a hook. And so, this wasn't necessarily born of the pandemic, but the effect of what we did ended up being something that I will use time and time again now. And that was that we co-branded our building with a charity event and movement, which was for us the Surfrider Foundation, because the ocean being right out our front door is a natural amenity to the project I was working on. So the project itself became a steward of the land and sea by sponsoring an event that ended up being a live auction event to raise money for the Surfrider Foundation. And ultimately, we were able to give $40,000 at the end of this 2-hour event one evening to the Surfrider Foundation. We hosted a beach cleanup, and it just tied so nicely with, the brand positioning of the project. It showed the developer and the project's commitment to investing in the community. And quite frankly, from a marketing perspective, all eyes were upon us. We had, the whole brokerage community showed up. Everyone was ready to party. We were on an open air rooftop, so there was no controversy. If you were there because you didn't care, or we had an open air rooftop.
Right.
And it was just a wonderful event, and it was meaningful. It had a purpose rather than just another, broker twilight cocktail event. This had some real purpose behind it. And I'll tell you, I think that's what made it so successful. I feel like people came out of the pandemic wanting to really have some meaning and purpose in their life. And even though that's
For sure.
a small thing, it really seemed to resonate with people, and they were so excited to be there. Again, people just bidding and on every possible item that we had. It was almost raucous. It was so exciting. So that was wonderful. And then the aftermath of that event, I had video for days. I had, clips to use on social media and Facebook and Instagram. We had PR coverage from several different publications. Then we had an event cleanup that we promoted. So it just went for miles for us. And the spend on the event, was minimal considering just the exposure we got. So, events, no big surprise for real estate. Event marketing is a huge driver for us. And, certainly with the brokerage community, the events go a long way, and with prospects as well. But this was different. And it was
Yeah.
a different level of success, I think, because people were craving human connection again, and they were able to commit their energy, time, and money to something that was, really making a difference for the community. All that stated, what's the lesson in that? Again, events are nothing new for us. I think, anytime you can tie what you're doing from a sales perspective to something that makes someone feel better about their contribution in the world, that's a positive. And that was the effect
Absolutely.
with our event marketing for my project in Palisades.
I think that's absolutely brilliant. And I wanted to dig into your marketing a little bit, but, one of the things about that you mentioned is that personalities are different. And, you had those personalities that were dying to get out and dying to get back around people. And they felt like they were caged animals in their houses. I was kind of one of those people. You're probably not surprised by that, but I like being around people. I enjoy calls like this, right? We're doing this virtually, and that's fun to do, but you cannot replace the human to human interaction, and tying that to something that also gives people purpose, I think was absolutely brilliant. Now today that you're back, have you just fallen back into kind of the traditional practices that you had pre-COVID? And is that just now kind of ramped up? Or have you been able to combine some of the things that you learned during COVID and created now basically an elevated program or more of a hybrid program that accomplishes your sales and marketing?
I think you nailed it, Monty. It's the latter. And,
Okay.
I think out of crisis, hopefully we emerge stronger. And I think certainly for the work that I do and the people that I've guided in the sales process for real estate, that was the case. We took the best of what we leveraged and learned, and we integrated that more heavily into our well-established marketing and sales platforms. So, video is huge, and I think certainly if there's any medium that has gotten more focus and attention from me, it's video. And as I said before, we used it, but we are just getting a lot more creative and aggressive in how we use it now. I also learned, again, we found people so hungry for information. So, the video, like you said, the Zoom engagement, it's great. It's a wonderful, wonderful technology and tool that allows us to be in the same place at once from a world away. So
Yeah.
obviously it's wonderful and we all love it, for its virtues, understanding its limitations. So, yeah, I would say, doing video tours is still great for people who are busy. Again, it's just a way to connect with them and build that relationship, establish rapport, and engage in discovery before you get them on site. So it's just another tool in our toolbox. And what I learned most of all, Monty, you touched on as you were asking me the question, and it's that if ever there was any question about whether, a high ticket sales process was best facilitated in person, there's no doubt in my mind that that's the case.
Yeah.
And, we are organic beings and we read energy off of one another, not to be too woo woo, but, those nonverbal cues mean something. And
Yeah.
if you're a very astute salesperson, the slightest little twitch may give you some insight about how your buyer is feeling in any given moment during your sales presentation and process. So that's what we learned is that, whenever you can, get in front of someone, get someone physically in front of you. You're going to capture their full attention and focus rather than them petting the cat while they're on Zoom and they're eating their acai bowl. So it's better to have their full attention and that face-to-face interaction whenever you can get it. But it
Yeah.
doesn't mean you shouldn't rely on these other modalities to bridge the gap until you can have that face-to-face meeting.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I mean, I love Zoom. I love, the technology that allows us to do these things. But you give me the option to do a call in front of Zoom or go out for a cup of coffee and sit for an hour and really get to know somebody, I'll take the coffee every time.
You get further. I feel like um, I kind of came to that epiphany recently, just in my personal networking. I was relying pretty heavily on Zoom, and I shifted the last few months to going, you know what? I'll meet you. I'll drive the hour. I'll drive the hour back. Let's have lunch. And the result of my meetings that take place in person are exponentially different than the ones that occur just in a quick 15-minute Zoom. They come with a heavier weight, I think, from both parties if you're taking the
Oh
time to
yeah.
meet someone in person.
Yeah, I was just gonna piggyback off of that because it shows people that you care, and it shows people that they're important.
That's
A
right.
Zoom call is super simple, and
That's right.
and
No
it
effort.
can be somewhat impersonal. I mean, but to your point, I mean, being able to sit down and look at somebody face to face, you can see eye shifts, and you can, and your different body positions and everything that all plays so much into the sales process. Um, let's shift and talk about leadership a minute. You lead a team. You've grown a fabulous company. It's one thing, to talk about sales and, helping a team understand sales process during an event like COVID and shutdown and everything else. But talk to me about your leadership principles kind of through that. And now that it's passed, how did you have to work with the team? Did you lose people? Was it more difficult during that time? Did you have to do a lot more hand holding and nurturing of your team? Or, you're also dealing with yourself, right? I mean, we were all affected by that. So can you talk me through a little bit how you kind of dealt with your team through those times?
Well, listen, Monty, I won't lie to you. It was a stressful time. It was tough on everyone for all the reasons you mentioned. As a leader, part of your job is to be able to have some control over your own emotions and at least to be able to rein them in to the extent that you can lead other people who trust in your leadership. So, that's number one is self-management, and being able to uh, maintain stillness in the eye of the storm. And I think that is the mark of a great leader, someone who is highly adaptable. The reality is the only thing that we can really count on in life or in business for that matter is change. It's the only constant is that things will be different tomorrow. They will be different and they will be different the day after that. And that is really all we can count on. And so I feel as a leader, you have to be ready to roll with the punches. And I also feel that, out of the box creative thinking is critical during times of crisis. That's the time to innovate, to be able to step outside of your own point of view and into the point of view of others to come up with innovative solutions. And, going back to the adaptability, I also think that natural leaders sort of thrive in chaos. It's showtime when the shit hits the fan, so to speak. Forgive my language on the
No,
podcast,
you're
but
fine.
it's showtime when things get rough for a lot of leaders.
Yeah.
And I would probably characterize myself as that kind of leader. For better or for worse, I tend to perform my best under pressure or when I'm backed into a corner. And the pandemic was, no exception, certainly. So, we did what we had to do. And I found myself dealing with a lot of emotions, obviously, ambiguity. No one likes ambiguity. I feel like, salespeople in an office waiting for a prospect to walk through the door. And now those prospects aren't walking through the door. They really don't deal well with ambiguity. And trying to just assuage the concerns of my sales staff in an environment that at that point, we had no clarity on how things were going to roll out or what we could do. And I found as a leader, the best thing you can do is over communicate. So I was with my teams constantly, and, a team that maybe I would only see once a week. We were on Zoom every day, pep talking, trying to motivate, keeping people, their mindset on the straight and narrow so that no one went off the rails. And I lost a couple. I had one or two that went off the rails. They couldn't make it through the 3 or 4 months
Sure.
that it was just, unbearable for everyone. But what I found is if you tell people, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to be able to tour next week. Here's the new form that everyone's going to fill out. You've got to ask every client to sign it. You're going to send it to them in an email before they even come in the door. Just being high touch with your salespeople as you would be high touch with your prospects.
Yeah.
And that worked better than anything, is just being highly accountable to my team, to be there as their resource, to help guide them through the process and to give them the tools that they needed to ultimately do their jobs, and making sure I was communicating that constantly so no one was left in the dark or feeling ignored.
I think that's beneficial for any sales leader, marketing leader, company leader, what have you. Over communicate.
Yeah.
I think so many people's problems and cultures in a company and stuff is because of a lack of communication. And, that is well said. And congratulations to you for doing that and for having the understanding to do that, because, it's difficult for people to have to develop their own plans. They look for leaders to shape that and guide that, and they need that and they want that. Right. So, I don't think there was any industry outside of maybe the hospitality industry that was hit harder during COVID than real estate. Especially in commercial office space and stuff like that. There's just like a decimated industry. So while it has now, kind of come back a little bit within real estate, economy affects everything. And now buying a house has gotten so much harder for people. Real estate has just gone up exponentially. So it's you take a long sales cycle and you make an exceptionally longer. So you've kind of come out of one crisis, and now it's like a breath of fresh air, I would imagine. Oh, we're back. We're out here doing it. And now the economy comes in behind it. And it seems to be one pressure after another. Just like you said, there's always change. That's what you're guaranteed. But when you have something that's kind of one after another, how do you maintain the mindset of winning and the mindset of it's going to be okay and we're going to make it through it and we're going to be able to do this. Do you have any tips that you can give people?
That's a great question. I would almost give you a kind of a spiritual answer. I think that,
Good.
you have to kind of surrender to the process. And like I said, you mentioned it, this change in adaptability, it is guaranteed things are going to change, and they're not always going to change in your favor as much as we hope that they're going to. And I think the less you attach your ego to outcomes, the more stability you will have emotionally over the course of your personal and professional life. If you have a lot of ego attachment to a sales platform, a company, a sales team, anything, you're probably going to have some pain because it's going to change, and it's probably going to, and in sales, certainly we're pivoting all the time. In real estate, it's all about repositioning and, sharp pivots because of market volatility that hits us every 7 to 10 years. So it's nothing new. The first few years of my career, I took it hard because I thought, oh my God, the whole world is falling apart. And it did. And it's now done it several times over the course of, 2+ decades I've worked in it. So it's the natural, we rise to the peak and then we fall to the valleys. And the less you can attach your ego to that roller coaster ride, the easier it is to endure. So I tell people, to be diverse in their interests. I think it's important to always be strengthening our skill sets, especially in a world that is changing exponentially more rapidly than it has in the past. And that's basically it, is, to keep striving to be a better version of yourself every day, knowing that, there's going to be some falls along the way, and you kind of have to take the cyclical nature, at least in real estate, as par for the course.
Boy, I tell you what, I could literally spend an entire episode with you on this.
We could get into the weeds, Monty. I have many things to say about this whole matter of the market, but yes.
That whole mindset component, I think is just so important. And I love what you had to say about it. I mean, I can quite honestly say, that in the times with my own business and stuff when it's down, there is a lot of ego in play. And I don't like that, because it makes it exponentially harder to deal with it. And if your emotions are constantly up and down, if you're going to rise and fall with every conversation that you have, and whether you think it was successful or not successful, and you're going to tie yourself so closely to what you're determining is success, which is a closed deal, then man, you're not going to last very long in sales. And, like I said, I could spend an entire hour with you on that topic alone, but
well, it goes back to, having to fall in love with the process and the actual work that you're doing. Like, what is it that you're giving out there to the world? And I'll be honest, like, I grappled with this issue a lot the first half of my career because of volatility that, would come crashing down upon me. And I go, well, wait a minute, yesterday everything was great and I was flying high, and now I'm, knocked to the ground on my knees. And it's happened enough times in my life that I figured out, I better start learning how to endure this a little bit better. And so there's a certain amount of detachment that I've learned to assign to anything I'm working on. I just, it's a loose grip. It's not a death grip anymore. And I think,
That's correct.
The more we can approach our lives with a loose grip, knowing that things likely will change and we might have to adapt, the easier it is for us to adapt when the time comes.
Yeah, that's so good. I have learned to celebrate the small wins.
That's right.
And you can make anything a small win, right? Just that, I made 5 phone calls today. That's
making your bed in the morning could be a small win.
Yeah, exactly. I even got out of it.
Yeah, that's a bigger one, actually. That's the hard one.
So, yeah, that's really good. Well, boy, I so appreciate you taking your time with me today. It's such an amazing conversation, and I can tell why you have been so successful in business and been able to ride through these storms. You're clearly an exceptional leader of your people, and So tell me what, just for the sake of the fans here, so to speak,
Sure.
tell me about the best deal you ever had.
The best deal?
Yeah, that you closed.
Oh, that I closed. Oh,
What was most memorable? The one that you hold on to the most?
I'll tell you one that stuck with me for a long time. I was selling a project in Hollywood. And the moral of the story is never judge a book by its cover. And, for salespeople especially, it's easy to make snap judgments about who's going to be the big whale, right? And the guy that comes in with the Breitling watch or whatever, you think that's going to be the guy that buys the penthouse.
Yeah.
Well, it's a big mistake as a salesperson to make assumptions, right? And so I remember this vividly. This guy walks in an orange jumpsuit into my sales office, and this is probably 20 years ago. And I mean, fine looking guy, but orange jumpsuit, dirt under his nails, just looked like he was a mechanic, and he'd just come off of, out of his shop, and comes in asking about this condo, very unassuming, never expected anything from this guy. Turns out, like I said, he looked like he just rolled out of the mechanic's office. Pulls out a wad of cash. He's just, got wads of, money rolled up in his jumpsuit. I mean, this guy operates only in cash, you can tell. So long story short, this man apparently owned one of the largest textile firms in the Midwest. And he was the most unassuming, down-to-earth man you'd ever met. And, I remember my judgment of him when he walked in the door and thinking, oh, God, this guy's going to waste my time. And I'm going to run this guy around in his orange jumpsuit for what? For what? Just to entertain him for the afternoon? Well, he ended up purchasing one of our most expensive penthouses in the whole community. And if you had asked me, the first 20 seconds I'd met him, whether that would have happened, I would have absolutely told you never in a million years. And so it was a real lesson for me to take everyone at face value and, allow them to show you who they are and how they want to reveal themselves. But don't make the mistake of making a snap judgment about people. And, we all are harshly judged by others at some point in our life. And it was a good lesson for me to, I certainly wouldn't want to be judged that way. Someone walking in off the street. And I certainly judged him that way and got a rude awakening that I was very much wrong. So that was a fun sale just because it was such a surprise, and it taught me a lot about how to really assess people. And I learned that I didn't know what I thought I knew.
It's such excellent advice. Never judge a book by the cover, right?
That's right.
That was excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us, Bree. Thank you for all of the knowledge that you have given us on the show today. Hope you guys have really enjoyed it. Be sure and catch all the contact information for Bree down below in the credits in our descriptions. And Bree, thank you again for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you on the show.
Monty, thank you so much. You were a fabulous interviewer, and I really appreciate the time today.
Oh, thank you.